Our item tonight and discussion will be around the idea of career and technical education. And we're going to begin with Dr. Shepard telling us a little bit about Triplett Tech and plans for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this evening, our focus is on career and technical education, and more specifically on Triplett Tech. We have wonderful career and technical education programs here in Shenandoah County Public Schools, where we graduate our students who are ready to enter the workforce. Unfortunately, we're not able to serve all of our students because we either have a wait list or weren't able to accept some students into the classes because of the size of the classrooms or the space available. We've been talking about career and technical education in Triplett Tech over the last several months and years, and we've highlighted the programs at the March 25th school board work session. This evening, Todd Lynn is going to start us off with a brief discussion, an overview of the classes we currently offer at Triplett, 2 new programs that we started last year, the number of students that are on a waiting list, and then ideas for future programs. And after Mr. Lynn, we will hear from the team from RRMM Architects, and they will discuss our facility study that they just sent us some draft information on and their findings at a high level, and then they'll hone in on Triplett Tech and discuss options for providing additional space for those programs. So, Mr. Lynn, if you want to start us off.
Thank you, Dr. Shepard. Good evening, members of the school board. It is my pleasure to talk to you about CTE and Triplett Tech. We are off to an amazing start at Triplett this year. We're at record enrollment. We have 363 students enrolled in our classes right now. And as Dr. Shepard alluded to, we've got about 70 students that are on a waiting list that couldn't get into our programs because they're full. Just a little background on that, a lot of our programs are capped by OSHA standards, so they're capped at 20 or however many workspaces that we have. Currently, we have 18 total programs that we offer at Triplett, with our newest being the PTOT aid and the HVAC program that we started last year. One of those programs that does have a wait list is the HVAC program. So we put in our new group of students, and we've got about 12 more that we couldn't allow in. So when you look at space as a whole at Triplett, you've got 2 classroom spaces that are available on the healthcare sciences side that are open half a day. So we use those either in the morning or in the afternoon. Then we have 1 traditional classroom space that's available for another half a day. And then our early childhood education classroom is also set up available for a half a day. So we're using our space. Kids are there all the time, and it's pretty neat to be there. You guys are welcome to come anytime. 9 of our programs, 9 out of the 18 had to interview students. So when you talk about that wait list, it's not just one place. It's not just electricity. It's not just healthcare or culinary. 9 of our programs had to interview to allow students in to our programs. And then when you start thinking about the future, we have a survey that we did a couple of years ago. I'm working on another one that I'll bring back some more information. But when we did the survey about 3 years ago, we talked about welding. We brought in diesel. There were some thoughts around aviation. There's probably still a little bit of room to grow in healthcare sciences. And so I think there's still a wide variety of programs. Welding's another one that comes to mind. So there's still a wide variety of programs that we could offer our students. And we'd love to be able to find a home for those 70 students that couldn't get in. So happy to answer any questions about Triplett in our start of school, but we're super excited about where we are and where we may go.
Mike, go ahead.
You talked about the cap, and I missed it. There's something that limits you to 20 kids per class?
So the DOE, the Department of Education, sends out a cap, and that is done and formulated through OSHA, where we have, it's either capped at 20 or the amount of workstations that we have. So for example, electricity, they only have 15 workstations in the room that they're in. So we can only put 15 kids in there. That's a class that is capped no matter what at 20. But for us, because we only have 15 stations, it's capped at 15.
Okay, because I had a parent reach out to me and they wanted to know why, when we know kids are going to drop or change classes, because historically that does happen.
It does.
Why we don't start with more kids per class, but if you can't do that, is that what I'm hearing? You can't do it? Okay.
And so we have ag classes that are in that same, that fit that same category. Some family consumer sciences classes fit in that same category where they're capped at 20, or however many workstations that we have.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. For the ones that you do have interviews, are those for aptitude, or is it just because you don't have enough space for them?
It's because we don't have enough space.
That's for the reason.
Yes, ma'am.
So the 70 would be 70 people who are qualified?
Correct. Yeah, that we would, if we had unlimited space, we would allow them to come. But because of the rules and the workstations that we have, we're not allowed to do that. Yes, sir.
Is there a limit as to how many students you can have per instructor?
Yes.
If space were not an
Certain
issue?
programs, so like nurse aid, again, there's lots of little rules in career and technical education. So nurse aid, it's dictated by the Department of Nursing that we have to have a 10-to-1 ratio when we go to clinicals. So I can only have 10 students in there, or I have to bring in another instructor. So we had 16 students that wanted into that class. We were very fortunate to have one teacher. So we had to interview our students, and then we had to narrow that down to 10. Because there is some ratios that we have to obey by when we go outside of our walls for instruction.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Since this is a work session, we can continue to answer questions as, as we do the presentation. But right now, I'd like to introduce Chris Phillips and Mark Prost, who are from RRMM, and they will be sharing, again, the facility study first at a high altitude, and then we will hone in on Triplet Tech later in the presentation.
All right. Well, good evening. It's good to be with all of you all. Mark and I are kind of unsure about where we want to stand, so we might dance around the whole room. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. My name is Chris Phillips. I am principal architect with RRMM Architects, and joining me is Mark Probst, also principal deputy CEO for RRMM. And Mark's background is primarily been in facilities. He facilities director for BCCS for quite a while before coming over to RMM. So this is the kind of work that he loves to do, is passionate about, is very knowledgeable about. I want to just kind of have a quick preamble before handing it off to Mark to say a few things about the time we've been able to spend with your people, the staff, the administration. It's been quite some time since we interviewed for the facilities conditions assessments, and we just are appreciative to be back in front of you, kind of show you a very high altitude of what that looks like. These are very detailed documents that will eventually get published and given to the staff here to review and distribute. But the time we've spent with your staff, your administration, has been a really rewarding process. We've gotten to know all your folks real well, and we spent quite a bit of time in all of your facilities. A lot of steps in over the past several months. We will focus in on Triplet, but Mark can really speak to all the facilities. We had assembled a team that came and spent quite a bit of time on site. The facilities condition assessments are really a roadmap to help you understand path forward for the facilities you have. But one thing to keep in mind is these things are trying to capture a snapshot in time. And they need to be changed and updated, and they're a living document. But at any point during the presentation, if you have questions, want to get into some details, we're happy to do that. Please interrupt us. We'd rather be more of a conversation than a presentation. We'd be happy to kind of expand on anything we're going to hit probably fairly fast. It is a lot of information. There's going to be a lot of abbreviations and lingo and things thrown out. Stop us and ask us. We'll try to explain everything in the greatest detail we can if you have more questions. I will say your facilities are really pretty amazing to have survived and lasted and served their purpose for as long as they have. Your staff, your janitorial people, your facilities folks and maintenance folks, it's clear that they love these facilities, that they care about them. They care about the students that are in them, and they're very well maintained and taken care of. But no matter how well things are taken care of in time, they eventually just wear out and have to be replaced. The normal wear and tear of the building is just a natural thing that happens over the course of time. So we will get into some of those details, and Mark can share those. I will come back up in just a little while and talk more specifically about a parallel study that we've done for Triplet Tech to help you understand kind of the age-old question. And you know, Mr. Lynn and Dr. Shepard have shared with you the success of CTE here in Shenandoah. We have witnessed it. We've been in the building. The students are passionate about it. Your instructors are passionate about it. Mr. Lynn is, I can assure you, we've been in a lot of CTE facilities across the Commonwealth. He is absolutely maximizing that building as great, to the greatest extent as he can. It is packed full, and those students are loving what they're doing there. So I'll come back up and we'll talk about kind of overarching age-old question. Can we renovate? Should we renovate? Or is it better to think about building new? And so we'll come back to that in just a bit. If Mark wants to take over.
I should just let it keep going. Said half of my presentation.
Sorry.
So real quickly, we want to talk about the overview, the purpose, and the process of the facility condition assessments that we completed, the overview of the data collection, the process in which we did that, what we looked at, and then the results. So going right into the purpose, typically facility condition assessments focus on providing you with a document that presents the current snapshot in time condition of each school or building assessed. And it's really done to forecast the funding requirements needed, whether they're in the short or the long term, to address any deficiencies, upgrades, renovations, or possible replacement. So we brought a team together of highly experienced individuals that have worked with us on many, many projects, many, many assessments, covering all facets from plumbing, mechanical, electrical, food service consultants to civil and site assessment, and then structural. And we walked through, early on, we walked through Triplet Tech, the maintenance building and transportation building back in January. And then during spring break, we walked the other 3 campuses in their entirety and walked each of the 3 schools on each campus in a day, and did that 3 days in a row. So from a data collection perspective, we assessed certain areas and building systems in each of the schools, and we'll run through those here in a second. And then all that data that's collected and pulled together is fed into a deferred maintenance schedule. I want to show you that deferred maintenance schedule, how that's used and how it pulls everything together. So the assessed areas, we looked at the exterior site conditions. This is just a short list of what we looked at on the exterior as an example. It's not exhaustive. I will bring note that the bottom right photograph, the athletic facilities, that those tennis courts at Strasburg look pretty bad shape there. My understanding is this past summer there was some work done on those and brought them back up to snuff. Look at the exterior building envelope, everything from the brick to the mortar deterioration, caulking, windows, doors, frames, any exterior paint. Interior finishes, floors, ceilings, walls, interior caulking, windows, doors, and frames on the inside as well, and casework. ADA accessibility, anything from accessible routes to restroom accessibility to signage, door hardware. And then looked at code or safety concerns, paths of egress from the building, possible trap hazards, fall protection, shower eye wash stations, etc. I held that button down too long. Roofing, looking at the roofing materials, ponding, possible degradation of the membranes or the insulation board below, skylights, gutters and downspouts, as well as wall flashings, coping, and metal panels. Mechanical systems, heating, cooling, air distribution and controls. Electrical systems, everything from the primary main distribution boards to distribution panels to fire alarm, lighting, and any specialty systems. Plumbing wise, looked at piping, water heaters, storm drainage, plumbing fixtures. Structural, any cracking, delamination, mortar deterioration on the interior of the building, concrete cracking, steel supports on the roof and lintels. And then fire protection system, sprinkler system, kitchen suppression systems, the fire alarm system as a whole, fire extinguishers. And then food service equipment, walk-in, cooler, freezer, serving areas, and distance to trash disposal. So once those walkthroughs are completed, everybody's back in their offices, they're looking at as-built drawings, they're looking at their photographs, they're looking at their notes that they've pulled together during their site visits. It all feeds into this deferred maintenance schedule. And this is a blow-up of the electrical section for Triplet Tech. There were 7 items of major concern that were noted with regard to deferred maintenance. You can see the units based on either square footage, unit costs, etc., that then expand out. And then we have also carried this deferred maintenance schedule out for a 15-year period. And then all the data is pulled together at the very bottom for an estimated deferred maintenance cost. And the figure in green represents the very poor and poor rated deferred maintenance items. So it's a 3-year window that we've looked at. And that is the dollar value that is utilized in calculating the facility condition index score for each school or building. So reading through the results, taking those into consideration, a facility condition index is actually an objective measure to evaluate the current condition of a school or building against the other buildings or other schools within the school division. So you can look at them apples to apples. There are a number of different factors that rate in so that we can make those apples to apples. And then again, like I said in the opening slide, it allows for the appropriate distribution of funds to the schools that are in need of the work to be completed. So this is the formula for calculating the facility condition index. It's the total deferred maintenance cost, which was in that green box. It's the first 3 years of that schedule, over the total current school or building existing value. So that's a dollar per square foot utilized for elementary or middle or high schools, multiplied by the square footage of those existing buildings. And it's really looking at the deferred maintenance over what the total cost is to replace that school in kind, same square footage, same system, same everything in today's dollars. And then FCIs are rated from an excellent to very poor based on the total overall FCI rating for each school. And this shows you the deferred maintenance costs for each of the schools divided by the current existing value for those schools to create or develop an FCI rating. So on the very far right, you can see the FCI ratings. And at the very bottom there, I have the FCI rating matrix again for reference.
Hey, Mark.
Yes, sir.
You're talking to somebody with a liberal arts degree, so I'm lost already. But can you tell me the 9.4 million? What does that represent in kind of realistic terms to me?
So it's every one of those assessed areas, and it's the number of deferred items that were selected or found in each of the schools per category, and then it totals it up.
So if we were to, let's just use an example for the electrical system at Triplet, that number was about what, 1.8 million of cost. That would be an estimate if you were to put out a project to have that electrical system replaced. It'd be $1.8 million. So that 9.8, 9.4,
9.3, yeah, 9.3.
that's the summation of all the things that you would identify as a deferred maintenance project that needs to happen at Triplet over the next 3 years.
So theoretically, you could take 9.4 million and do those repairs.
You could do the deferred maintenance items, yes.
Okay.
So replace an electrical system, replace some mechanical units.
It is important to note that because it goes out 15 years, there could be, in some of the schools, there could be dollar values that are fairly large in years 4, 5, and 6.
Mm-hmm.
Those are not calculated into this because we do a 3-year window for all the schools, so it's apples to apples. And some in 4, 5, and 6 may have very low numbers.
Thanks.
So I thought it might be helpful to then take the deferred maintenance costs and kind of break them down. We typically find that the plumbing, mechanical, and electrical systems in a building and the roofing systems are the biggest contributor to a high FCI score. And they are typically the systems that you cannot see. They're either under the slab, concrete slab, they're on the roof, they're in the walls, and they're out of sight, out of mind kind of systems. So you can see from this slide that 93% of the deferred maintenance for all the schools division-wide is related to plumbing, mechanical, electrical, and roofing systems. And then in the green box at the bottom, I tried to break that 86 million down so that you could kind of see where the money was allocated between plumbing, mechanical, electrical, and roofing. You can see 50% of it is mechanical related. So that's chillers, boilers, piping, rooftop units, those types of things. Any questions on this slide? So to sum it up, Chris said this earlier, I think, and so did Dr. Shepard. This is in draft format. We like to sit down with the school division once we've completed the drafts, walk through all the data, make sure there's nothing that we've missed or overlooked. It is a snapshot in time, so it does not take into consideration any capital improvement work that was completed this summer. The buildings are well maintained within the operational budgets. These are all systems that are aged, been in the building for 50, 60 years. Most of these systems have a 30 to 40 year lifespan, useful lifespan, life expectancy. The schools overall range from poor to fair. And again, 93% of the deferred maintenance values are in those 4 major systems.
All right, we want to take a breather here, and any questions on that very high altitude list? Okay. Well, we'll jump into that parallel path that I was sharing with you all earlier about our deeper dive into Triplet and spending a little more time evaluating that facility, its current capacities, the projected enrollment, and comparing that to its capacity. We have also evaluated the ability to expand that facility, and we'll present some key challenges to that as well. But this part of the effort was really a feasibility study. As I said earlier, to ask the age-old question, should we renovate, expand, or build new? And we kind of go into these efforts with our eyes wide open, looking for any possibilities that we may see, and sometimes we even surprise ourselves because we may go in with a preconceived notion, oh yeah, it's much better to build, or oh, it's going to be much better to renovate. But until we really take a deeper dive, that's just kind of a gut reaction. But this effort is really what I would call phase 1. We're at a macro level. That's what the administration has asked us to do, just to evaluate, does it make sense, or are there compelling reasons that we might go a little further into the study. So this is the phase 1 part. Phase 2 may be something that this board administration may want to consider as a next step. But that is to take a deeper dive into more detailed design work, more detailed cost estimating, scheduling, and creating a concept. Maybe it's a new build concept. But right now we're living there on phase 1, and we're going to present our findings of that. And really we do this because we don't want to burden you with costs that you don't need to spend. If there aren't compelling reasons to go to a phase 2, we don't want to take you there. So we begin these efforts always with, again, an eyes wide open approach, kind of removing ourselves from the existing building. Well, this is the way it's done, or it's the way it's always done, or the way it's always been, and kind of back out and say, okay, if we were going to talk about this facility with limited constraints, right? We're not going to tie ourselves down to has to be a certain size, has to be a certain aesthetic, has to be placed in a certain on a certain site. And we zoom out and we do a programming session. That's a visioning session that we have done with your administration, Mr. Lynn and Mr. Orts, to go through each particular center. We identify them as centers. You may call them academies. There are all sorts of languages that or terms that are used in that. But it's really parts of the building program. Programs that Mr. Lynn is seeing just expand or be popular, and things that they support currently. And then we try to project what may be programs that are coming, and we get them in this program. So ultimately, this is just an image of that program. It is about 10, 15 tabs on an Excel spreadsheet. This is just the summary tab, though, that I share with you, where we've gone through Center for Transportation, and we've identified each piece of that, whether that be diesel, welding, auto body. All those are within that square footage number that's shown there on the right. And then we go all the way down and sum up, if the program were to show and really reflect what Triplet Tech would support, that is the square footage. And that number is about 93,000 square feet. This was done in January as well. So if there are next steps, we would want to revisit this program. There may be more programs that are emerging. There may be some that are cutting back. So we want to make sure that we update this. And that 93,000 is really kind of a foundation for talking about what would it take to expand or build new.
Can I go back?
Sure.
So the ones in blue there are categories that you have developed in discussion with our folks, right?
That's right. Those are categories, just I would say titles of specific programs that
Okay.
Mr. Lynn is already
Okay.
supporting at Triplet.
So Todd, you're happy with this,
Yeah.
the capture of these headings, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That 93,000, does that represent what we're currently using or what we're dreaming of?
That's a great question. What you're currently using is far less than this.
Absolutely.
Far less than this. And I will show you that a little bit later when we get into cost. This is capturing the situations like that Mr. Lynn shared earlier. I had to turn away 70 students because I don't have space for them. I could have 20 students in this program, but I'm limited to 12 because that's all the stations I can fit in my room. So we're not measuring the rooms he has, we're measuring the rooms that he would need and trying to project even 5 years or more out of what enrollment might look like.
Thank you.
But follow up to that, so that is the same amount of students, but with an optimal area or more students?
More students
Okay.
in a more optimal area.
Okay. So that would be how many students, you know?
And I can expand this spreadsheet and pull those up, but I don't know where we are living right now
Would it
because
be-
we do it in 2 shifts.
Would it be the 363 plus a 70 or
I think it's even
more than
I think
that?
it's
Okay.
bigger.
It's greater.
It's bigger than that,
It's
okay.
greater than
Okay.
Right. And just kind of an aside, the numbers you see there on the bottom, the 35% and the subtotal of the net area, I won't get into any of that, but basically the net area is the square footage of the rooms. That 35% factor is to allow for corridors and circulation, elevators, or whatever that may take up space that you don't necessarily calculate in your program. So before we dive into Triplet, I want to just capture a few thoughts on key characteristics of a CTE center. What are the elements that are really expected in this day and time for such programs? And, you know, the existing Triplet Tech, I know there's a lot of affinity for that building, a lot of affinity for all the students that have come through there. And I'm sure that when it was built in its day, it served its purpose quite well. I'm sure it was a fantastic building. It has lived a very long life and has seen many renovations and things happen to it over the years, just small things here and there that even your own masonry program has done. But you know, at some point, that building has or will reach the end of that useful life to support today's CTE facilities. So, a few major categories that we would want to achieve in a CTE design today, whether we apply that to a renovation or a new. You want a future-proof design. CTE programs, these folks can tell you they are changing all the time. Programs reach a capacity, they live for 3 or 4 years, and then suddenly the market doesn't support them anymore. But there's a new program right on the heels of that that's going to take that space. So those spaces have to be future-proof, and through that you're seeking some sort of flexibility. And we achieve that through a few different ways. Generous interior clearances. So floor to the bottom of the roof structure. So critical in CTE design because the space may be used in the future for an automotive lift. Well, you're limited to how far you can go up with those. You may change a healthcare classroom, lecture room into a engineering lab. If that's the case, then you need a significant amount of space between the structure and the ceiling because all of your infrastructure lives in that space. Right now, Mr. Lynn, Mr. Orts are dealing with a lot of infrastructure that they can't even get to. It's all under slab, it's in difficult places to reach, so expandability becomes very difficult. Clear spans, and by clear spans I mean having a large room free of columns and bearing walls. That allows us to set up tables like this or in rows. And then try to limit those, or at least be strategic in where you place your interior bearing walls. That way, if programs change, you need to borrow the space that's beside you, you can take that wall out and expand. Heavy infrastructure is also just a critical piece of CTE. Adequate mechanical ventilation, whether that be because of exhaust or dust, fumes, it could be many reasons there, but it's a heavy, heavy, heavy mechanical building. Large capacity electrical service, and you want that to be expandable. We know at Triplet Tech through Mark's facilities conditions assessment and talking with Danny, that electrical system at Triplet is beyond capacity. It cannot take any more as it is. Keeping those utilities above slab and inaccessible chases or raceways where you can get to them, add on to them, modify them. Having compressed air, gas, water, all those things available. Many of these spaces now, they're all bringing it down from the ceiling in cord reels so we can move those around the room. Another is ample exterior space. And we'll show you some examples at the end of successful site planning for CTE, because the exterior yards and the project areas for CTE, especially on your building trades, is absolutely critical. You may have a carpentry class and a masonry class and an electrical class all collaborating on a house build in the yard. You have to have plenty of space to get around it, to move it, and hopefully take it off site. Secure exterior material laydown and storage. Steel, wood, pallets, all those things are expensive. They're a cost to the CTE center, to the county. You want to make sure they're safe. And then clearances for large vehicles. You have culinary arts, for instance. They're going to be getting trucks of food service delivery, all those sort of things that need large turning radius. And then ultimately the building layout, allowing for future expansion. That also plays into ample exterior area. So if we can plan for a 90,000 square foot building now, but in 10 years you need 110, you have a place to go with it. Careful placement of clean labs versus dirty labs. Clean labs may be a medical assisting or some sort of criminal justice. A dirty lab may be your masonry lab, your carpentry lab. Having those, the careful placement of those so that you're not cross-contaminating things. Also, the acoustical qualities of those particular programs. And then something a lot of people don't really think about, but we know through talking with the staff, public interface at a CTE center is so critical. If folks are coming in to get their hair cut at cosmetology, if your culinary program can support a bistro, there are a lot of options there. So thinking about how the building interfaces with the public, keeping them contained in a certain area. So if someone from the public's coming in getting a haircut on Tuesday at 2 o'clock, they're not wandering through your entire building to get to cosmetology. Those sort of thoughts are all critical in the success, because if you have public coming to the facility, you have a lot of support for CTE. Even the industries in the county are saying, wow, look at what that building's putting out. So let's talk about Triplet Tech specifically. This is an aerial image of your site. You can see the solar panel array there towards the left hand, or what we would call the rear of the property. The building there, just under 6375, that little marker. You can see there's really two major constraints, the first one being the site geometry. Very, very long, narrow site. There's really no way to circulate all the way around the building. And you're bound by neighbors that probably aren't going anywhere for a while. And then I would say that may be the case on the other side too. So you don't have any way to expand in either direction that way. So you only have kind of this shotgun lot. It's a relatively flat piece of property. It's a good thing going for it. Parking is extremely limited. We've spent several days there where we just about had to park out on the main road there just to get in the building. In certain part of the days, it is very, very congested. And then you have, of course, your solar array, great asset to a CTE building, CTE program. Many places are using those as teaching tools, bringing some of the infrastructure inside so the students can see how that's working. But that geometry, and we'll look at this a little bit later, but that geometry proves to be very, very difficult to think about building expansion. There's really not a lot of space to go with a building that's currently about 55,000 square feet, and you're going to need 90. So think about taking that footprint and doubling it almost. Second major constraint is the building height limitations. You all may recall a few slides earlier, I went into what makes a good CTE center. The very first item on the list was clearances, interior clearances. So this is just a quick analysis. You have two spaces there in kind of that beige color that are high bay spaces. What we would consider in this building the high bay spaces. You have automotive in some of that. You have some of the building trades in some of that. Even at 14.8, that is really, really low in today's standard. Most classrooms are just normal, K-12 kind of teaching classrooms. That 14.8 would be their minimum. Most of them are 16 feet to the bottom of structure to allow, again, for that sandwich of all these things you see above you right now. The ceiling tile, the lights, the sprinklers, that's all living up there. So that 14.8 is still even low, but that's the highest spaces you have right now, 14.8, 13.2, and then 9 feet and 9 feet 7 inches for the rest of the building. That makes, and these guys know, makes it very, very difficult to do anything with those classrooms to upgrade them. You have no space above the ceiling to run any new infrastructure. A lot of things will be running raceways on the walls just to get power and other utilities to the needed location. So we're really, really limited in our clearances here. And so if we just take a second and say, okay, what can we keep and renovate? So this is just an initial concept. It's again, this is a very high altitude, just done with some overlay. But the red outline you see there is your existing building footprint. If I go back, kind of burn that image in your mind, and then go to this one, that red outline is your existing building footprint. The two yellow boxes that say renovation are your two existing high bay spaces. So in this particular concept, we kind of freed ourselves a little bit from the constraint and said, what if we demolish all of that 9, 7, and 9 foot clear structure and left the two high bay spaces? What would we have? And so the areas in navy blue there are expansion, new build areas. We have a 2-story wing on the front that faces the main road with an expanded parking area. That two-story wing would probably be dedicated, and we'll look at it a little bit later, for clean labs, administration, your front door. And then we add in some new mid-height spaces and new true high bay spaces, more of the 16 to 20 foot clear for things like your auto body shop and things of that nature.
Do we know right now what kind of power is available in that area to expand, or the power that that building's got right now? I know you said it's maxed out, but is that the max that the power company can provide in that area?
Yeah, so the service to the building is maxed out. The actual electrical switchgear in the building itself is maxed out. I believe that there is ample power from the utility to increase that. So again, this is just really high level, what all those spaces in the program that I talked about at the very beginning, that's if we were to lay those out. You see the gold color there, the center, there's masonry, HVAC, electrical, carpentry, welding. To the north of that, auto body, and then a service yard north of that. We have assumed, and we had discussions with the solar panel company that you all are contracted with, what can we do with those? Because obviously we have to expand that area if we're going to make this building a 90,000 square foot building. They are agreeable that they can be relocated. They can be placed on the roof. It can be part of the new design. So that is an option. So we've added additional parking there towards the rear where the existing solar panels are. You can see the dash line that says future expansion. We're trying to allow for that flexibility. And then the outdoor service yard area, unfortunately, there's just nowhere to go with that. So even in this expanded facility, renovated facility, your service yards are still what they are. There really isn't anywhere to go.
So you put some parking up front, and also that front space is a two-story area.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that front leg, kind of the top of the T there, that is a two-story. That's that two-story clean lab and administration area. Also kind of a, what we're seeing emerging in CTE centers is the ability to bring in industry, right? That's always been part of it, but now they're hosting expos. They're having career fairs set up in the CTE center. And so that front door area would have an expo type space to allow those industries to come in, to allow Mr. Lynn to interface with them and then bring students to them or them to the students. And we'll zoom in a little bit so you can see a little better. You can see it creates a lot of ins and outs, odd shapes, tough to fit all of that on that long, narrow site.
How much roughly guesstimate would we be looking at to do that?
I'll show you that. That's the hard part of the presentation. And then this is zooming in on that two-story. Again, very high altitude, quick sketches, but it is to scale, represents the 93,000 square feet. So even if we want to go this route, how in the world do we accomplish it? Triplet can't shut down for 30 months, 24 to 30 months, maybe even longer than that. The difficult part of this building, one of the difficult parts of this building in the renovation mode is how in the world can you do all of that and keep Triplet Tech running? You can't shut down the school for 36 months. It's going to take longer to renovate than it would be to build new. So you have to think about phasing. And I will tell you, this phasing plan is at a very high altitude, and it would need to be proved out with the contractors and so forth. But this is just our initial thoughts about how it may happen. Phase one, we would build the new two-story building and the high bay, piece of the high bay towards the rear, basically creating a sandwich. So we'd build those two. That would allow the administration and other programs to go out into the new. And then we would start renovating, or we would tear down, the first piece of the existing building and then do that expansion. Phase 3 would be then the renovations of the high bay, that first high bay. Phase 4 would then be the last piece of the sandwich to tie it all back together again. At the end of the day, and our estimates will show you, but at the end of the day, it may even cost more to renovate than to build new because of the intricacies of things like this.
Have you guys looked at other property that we own?
Well, we've been all
Possible
over the whole district through the FCAs. We know of a piece that is here at Central that's available. Other than that, we really have not been given that charge to go out and look for more properties.
So, oh,
No, you finished.
so no feasibility study's been done on that property at Central?
That would be that phase 2 that I talked about. If you all would like to take that on as a next step, that would be the next phase.
Yeah, my question was, because I can see how if you're building that first part of the building, it doesn't affect anything else, and then you can move some of the classroom in there, but when you're doing the auto repairs and all those other ones, you can't really move them, right? I mean, are you gonna have to shut down those programs for that year, or
So
for 2 years, or?
The hope, and we had this discussion with Mr. Lynn. There are some industries in the community that may be willing to take on students at their facilities temporarily. It's not ideal. You have to figure out how they get there and get back. And then they're working in a real world environment that may not necessarily be the safest step for them at their point in their education. So it would take some shuffling during construction. We do, a large portion of our projects have been renovation over the past 5 to 7 years, especially at the high school level. So this is at, again, a very high altitude, but if this were to be a project you would want to take on, we would work directly with your contractor and actually draw out a schedule, a step-by-step, these people are moving here, these people are moving here on this date. And so it's highly detailed schedule to keep everybody safe. But some of those finer details of, can we get in this high bay space and these students be somewhere else for 6 months? That would have to be a discussion that you'd have to have, yeah.
And it's
Well,
also
that's why
insurance.
the phase 1 left in with the high bay
Right.
is built in phase 1.
Yeah.
I mean, it is not typical to build the first 2 phases at either end. That is really not, you kind of go in sequence. So that would be high bay space that we could relocate other high bay classrooms to, labs to.
So based on the logic of the problems that are inherent in doing this in phases, it would seem then that would almost rule out using that particular land to put in a brand-new building. Because in essence, you'd have to close everything down. Is that correct?
We had some discussion on that possibility. There are a few factors I failed to mention. Access to that cemetery is through your property. They're driving on to Triplet Tech to get into that cemetery. So can you shut that down during a construction and not allow folks into that? I don't know what the intricacies of that right of way looks like, but that would be a problem. Even if, and I should back out here, maybe this will be a little easier to talk about. There we go. So you can see, even if we built all the way at the rear of the property, you're still going to be facing the same constraints. You're bound on both sides. Parking becomes difficult. We actually wondered, and it's not been asked, but that adjacent property would be ideal, right? You could access it the same way, plenty of room to expand. But there could be there could be a lot of the same issues, right? You still have to access it down the same point you have now. There's no other way to get to it from Main Street, the main road out there. So that's a long-winded answer, but we did question that. Is it possible to maybe take down the solar system for a period of 2 years and have to renegotiate that contract and then build an entirely freestanding building there, then tear down the entire Triplet Tech existing? But you're still, that long, narrow site, you're still going to be faced with the same long-term problems. And then you become so far removed from the road too, that public interface is, the value of that kind of diminishes some.
What's the average cost of a new CTE building per square foot?
You're just wanting me to get to it. aren't you?
I'm a numbers
I'm
guy.
okay with it. I'm okay with
Are
that.
you telling me he's moving too slow?
I should have asked if there were any time constraints. I apologize. So, we've looked at this in a comparison format, cost preliminary, what we call an order of magnitude cost estimate. That's where we purely take what we're seeing in the market as a square foot cost for construction, whether that be renovation at $1 value or new at another dollar value. These are real numbers that we're pulling from recent bids, things that are happening in this particular area, as well as all around the Commonwealth. You can hop on the Virginia DOE website, and it has all recent bids listed there and see what those numbers are. Although I would caution you that make sure you know the whole story there, because they don't put all the details of how they get to those numbers. And then we also have a lot of general contractors, construction managers, things like that, that we bounce this off of to see where we're falling. So we've looked at this as let's look at a theoretical new site. We're going to pretend that there is a new site somewhere in the county for a new building, a theoretical new building that has not been designed. It's purely a square footage number. That's it. And then compare it to renovating your triplet tech. And this is why it's kind of jarring in a way how close these actually end up being. And that's why I said earlier, I would venture to say that because of the intricacies of the renovation of triplet, it may even cost more. So that's not factored into this. This is purely all of the things it would take to renovate. So new building, we use 98,000 square feet. That was where we were living for a while, but we pared back the program. Cost per square foot of a new building right now, a new CTE, high school, K-12, they're somewhere living between about $425 and $450 a square foot. That's the number we're seeing. A lot of that it depends on how the project delivered, and that's another hour presentation, and I won't go there. But the bid market seems to be improving some. We're seeing a lot more hunger, more general contractors pursuing bigger work, which there for a while we were not at all. People just could not get enough laborers to come to work. So we used 450. That's a fairly safe number right now. We're using about 300 for renovation. So 450 per square foot new, 300 for renovation. $17 a square foot for demolition. Seems a little inconsequential in the whole grand scheme of things. And then the site work, I'll explain, that's an allowance. And the reason we just have to plug that in there, and we use the same number for both to have an apples to apples comparison. The site work we can't really calculate until we know the site, right? So we just guessed there's a 20-acre site somewhere in the county that you may develop, but we're using about $7.5 million for site development, whether that be new or renovated. If you were to renovate at triplet, it may be marginally less because some of the major utilities are already present. But when you look at the amount of additional parking, renovating the parking you have, the amount of demolition you'll do, that site work number is still going to be fairly high.
So Chris, so there's a similarity of dollar cost here, and this is what you guys do. I'm thinking about land acquisition, which you don't have to worry about, we do. And then what do we do with the old site, which is the way we've described it, not very advantageous to our fiscal position. So, we have to consider that. Do you guys take that into account?
Yeah, absolutely. So next steps, one of the next steps you may consider are things like the cost of land acquisition. And this spreadsheet goes from about 10 line items to 50 or 60. We start to expand that detail of the cost. Land acquisition might be a part of that. You have other costs too that are, other soft costs that you just don't always think about. If you whether you build or renovate, I'm sure Todd would say that the existing Triplet Tech is humming along. They're doing great, but they're working on their furniture. They're working on all their training stations all the time to keep them operational. You have to have an FF&E budget, furniture, fixture, and equipment budget. And for CTE, that's a fairly large number. In this level of spreadsheet, you see that soft cost ratio of 0.85. That basically is saying about 15, and sometimes it's upward of 18% of your budget goes to other things that aren't bricks and mortar. There are things like testing, construction testing, materials testing, our fees, FF&E budget. You know, your FF&E budget for a building of 100,000 square feet, it may be $4 million of your budget. Technology, AV, all of those things.
Permit fees.
Mm-hmm.
One more question. So for the renovation, is that pretty much taking care of all the mechanicals and all that? I mean, because another thing would be, we don't want to renovate and then be facing more costs on the road.
That would be assuming that whatever building is left standing,
Mhm.
it's 100% new infrastructure inside of it.
Our central campus, this might be for Dr. Shepherd, the central campus, do we have 20 acres available there?
So we have 2 parcels of land. One is 40 acres at the central campus, which is right behind Peter Muhlenberg Middle School. And then we have some acreage that's adjacent to Sandy Hook Elementary School. And I don't know that, how many acres that is.
And as a frame of reference, and I think the VDOE still recognizes this, but for a long time, just kind of a rule of thumb for an elementary school of like 600 students, I think, a fairly smaller elementary school, the minimum acreage had to be at least 13 acres, if I remember that number. 13 or 15 acres. Your existing triplet is 13.5, and a CTE center needs far greater acreage than an elementary school.
Is 20 acres enough for,
That's a good number. That's a
does
good
that give room for expansion later on down the road?
Yeah, it sure does. And, you know, there may be other things that you want to consider as part of that. You know, it would have to be a greater look by the whole team here of what else would want to go on that site. You know, you may consider some sort of centralized facility for a sports team, or there may be other functions that need to be housed there. But 20 acres is a good number to give you plenty of room to be flexible, have large exterior yard space, plenty of circulation.
That includes the
15
parking.
acres too. Sorry.
No, does that include the parking and all that?
Yes.
Okay.
The 15 acres too for schools takes into consideration all the play fields, ball fields area, athletic spaces, so very limited for CTE. Yeah.
All right, so some pretty big numbers there, right? A new build about 60 million, renovate about 60 million. There's also other rules of thumb out there that the VDOE would share that we've used for a long time. A lot of times we look at these build versus new on a percentage. If it's 75% of the cost to renovate versus new, it's almost always build new.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
If the cost to renovate is 75% of the cost to build new of the same size facility, the rule of thumb says you should really consider the compelling reasons to build new.
We're past that.
You're far past that. Yeah. And you know, we're trying to be, as your consultant, as objective as we possibly can. We're not necessarily here to promote one over the other. However, we think the facts are right here in front of us.
What kind of ballpark would we be looking at for your firm to do a feasibility study at the central campus to build new?
So no facility studies are built the same. It would depend on the amount of detail and level you want us to go to. We've done facility studies that are kind of quick hitting and fast for about, let's just say about 25,000, but we've done studies that have been as much as 200,000. So it's a really wide range. We would work close with Dr. Shepherd on a scope of work, let her present it to you guys and say, is this what we want? And then give you a fee that matches and commensurate with that. So this is a snapshot of if we were to build this in 2025. These are today's dollars. And we would just want to kind of illustrate the cost of waiting. We understand that you just don't go down the street and ask for $60 million. It doesn't happen overnight. We are very aware of that. But escalation is a very real part of our market. I will say that the latest reports are escalation is kind of flattening. If you all listen to the news, you know, I'm an NPR guy. I'm up and down 81, listening to NPR. It drives my kids crazy. But I'm listening to NPR and all the money reports. Escalation seems to be getting a little more flat. In the past 5 or 6 years, we've seen escalation go as much as 10 or more percent, which is astronomical. When the pandemic hit, shortly after the pandemic, we started seeing those effects in the market. The cost of steel increased by 300%. So that is not projecting a 10% escalation. The 3.5% is sort of the norm. That's what historically we have seen over a long span of time, not just the past 5 to 7 years. So 3.5%, if you compound that over the next 4 or 5 years, and if we were to be at the midpoint of construction in fiscal year 2028, it's an increase of almost $7.25 million just by waiting 4 years. Which, by the way, design of a facility, whether it's renovation or new, schedule-wise, you should probably allow for 8 to 12 months minimum for the design team to put together all the documents. And then you need to allow a construction team a minimum for a 100,000 square foot facility, a minimum of 24 months, probably closer to 32 or 36 months for construction. So you add all that up, you're at 4 years pretty fast.
The final figure there of $60,700,000 is based on a design that would fit in the old or the present triplet.
Yes, sir.
So does your configuration, does your design change if the land shape changes?
That's a great question. That's a great question. You're touching the architectural side of things now. Absolutely. We do not promote picking up a standardized footprint and dropping it on a site. Our approach would be an approach that takes into consideration what the site can offer us. One of the most, and this is just one example of many, but one of the most critical elements in any new design, and this is a scientifically proven fact, is the ability to capture daylighting within instructional spaces dramatically changes scores, attitudes, everything about the student is greatly enhanced when they have access to natural light. So we try to design buildings that take into account north-south directions, the exposure for natural light from above. Not only does it improve your students' environment, it helps on your facility costs. So we reduce the cost of your power bill because we're using natural daylight to light a classroom versus what we're doing right now. That's just one example of many. There may be things like views, access, right-of-ways, easements, all those things factor into the building form and placement on the site. And we try to be very cautious about that in our design process.
So if you were to apply a little Kentucky windage here, you might posit that the number could come down if it were, if you were constrained by the current site and you are no longer constrained by that shape. Could we look forward to something that's less expensive based on what you just said, or more likely something more expensive?
I would say it's certainly feasible. I would say that when we look at it at this altitude, square foot cost is square foot cost is square foot cost. Whether it's a building with 16 inside corners or a perfect square, it's 100,000 square feet either way. So at this level, that's what this cost estimate is showing. What we would say is whatever the design would be, we would promote efficiency, being cost effective. You all, way early in the design, in the process, I showed you the program and I said, okay, you're building your net area 65,000 square feet or whatever it was. I don't remember now. I think it's around 65,000. And then we have that factor of 35% of spaces that they're hallways, they're restrooms, they're all those things that are not occupiable classrooms. A really efficient design, you might see that percentage drop to 28%, 29%. And so that drops your square footage. So what I'm getting at is if we're just looking at square footage as our basis for cost, less square footage, greater efficiency in your cost. We would certainly probably not promote a building with 16 inside corners for your new CTE center, because we know that is costly. It would just elevate the cost. So there's a lot of things that go into building that cost estimate. How much glass are we using? You know, what are the materials? We want something that's long lasting, durable. I mean, look at your facilities now, right? Masonry buildings that were built in the 60s, right? And we don't build buildings like that anymore, but they have lasted so long with really very little exterior maintenance done. And that we would promote the same approach even to a new build today. They're just built differently. All right. Do you all want me to continue for just a few more minutes? So this is, we hit you with the facts of what you have, then we hit you with kind of the hard news, all that cost. We kind of want to tailor the end of this to something that feels a little better and positive. So we're going to show you a couple examples of projects that our firm has recently done or are doing right now that are good examples of CTE centers. And those characteristics I shared with you earlier, you're going to see those in a building form. This is by no means to promote either of these projects. There are plenty of other CTE centers out there that are achieving this. But I think this kind of puts it into perspective about what you would want to expect for a really efficient CTE center on a 20-acre lot. So the first one is Roanoke County. This project right now is in the final stages of design. They're actually starting to move a little bit of earth on the site. So you can see that site, it's ample. There's plenty of room to circulate all the way around the building. The building itself is a leggy building, which is what we like when we're trying to capture things like the solar orientation and the ability to expand in multiple directions, right? It also provides a good separation for acoustical qualities from clean labs versus dirty labs. But you can see the front parking area, bus loop, that side parking area there, and then access for the early preschool. And then the rear yard, you can kind of see the size space you have back there. It's all secured by a security fencing. Sits a little bit high on the knoll here, has a nice presence over the street, Peters Creek Road there below.
What size lot was that?
That's a great question. I don't remember, but I think it's about it's in the 20s. It's in the 20s.
What size building, square foot?
This building. Okay, that's a great question. The two projects I'm going to show you are polar ends on size. This one is 120,000 square feet. The second one I'll show you is closer to your existing Triple Tech, about 50 to 60,000 square feet. So our programming for triplets falling kind of right between those two. So just zooming into the plan a little bit, you can see that first of all, on each end of the wings, that future expansion area, the areas in that kind of teal blue area there, those are all the auto-focused programs. The main administration, a very clear main entry. Right inside of that main entry, you see the green square kind of right in the knuckle of the building. That's their commons area, but they plan to use it for their expo kind of center. It can be subdivided into two different rooms, so it could be 2 lecture rooms at any given time. It could be wide open for a career fair. Just a side note, the auto folks are long-term project. They've been working on a classic muscle car for several years. They've rebuilt it from the frame. Their engine guys are rebuilding the engine. Their plan is to be able to take it out of the shop and roll it right through the back door into the middle of that expo center so people coming in can see what these students have been doing. And we'll show you some renderings of what that'll look like. Again, this is not built yet. We're in the final stages. There is a portion of the building that's 2-story. We have engineering up there, as well as some mass comm and ELL classrooms. You can look down into the shop spaces there, the kind of that big giant white area there. I'm going to go through them quickly. These are just some renderings. You can see that rear yard area. the ability to subdivide all that space so you can have your auto guys there with all their bodies and engines and whatnot out on the yard. But on the kind of the north part of the plan there, you see storage for lumber racks and things like that for your building trades. Again, plenty of circulation. Then the new kind of front entry coming up the slope there. This is that green area, that commons area. You can see that image there on the upper left. Our graphic artist used Herbie instead of the muscle car, but that's okay. I think it fits kind of well. But that's with the foldable partition up. You can kind of see it there in the ceiling right there to allow for a large space. These spaces are heavy, heavy, heavy on AV technology, screens everywhere, graphics everywhere. And these two images show it in lecture format, but you can see the smaller image there on the bottom. That's with that partition down, so you can have two classrooms at once if you want to, or 2 lecture halls. The next project, this is Culpeper County, their CTE center. I'd encourage you, if you haven't, by the way, if you haven't been to any of these, we can certainly arrange for tours of the ones we've done, and other architects can do the same. Culpeper is a great one to visit. I think just about every school district in the Commonwealth of Virginia has been and visited this facility. This one was an award winner a couple of years ago as well. But to your question about the how to situate a building on a site, what factors will we consider? This is just showing, hey, we think about the orientation to the sun so we can capitalize on the solar panels and natural daylight. Again, ample site room, plenty of circulation. The CTE yard is smaller, but it is half the size of the other building that I just showed you. Very efficient building, 1 corridor, double loaded, spaces on both sides, dirty labs to the north, cleaner labs to the south. This is just a conceptual building section. If I were to cut that building in half and open it up, wanted to show you this just to illustrate the clear height for the auto service industry guys and how this building form captured that. And that's what it looks like today. That's the built environment there.
Can you go back a couple?
Sure.
Right there. So you're talking about the kind of the clean look of that one. It's almost like a suite when you
Yes.
go down. We have a little bit of that at Triple Tech right now.
You certainly do, yeah.
And it seems like that would actually fit on the space that we have. It gets back to your earlier question about how you phase it or time it, whatever, but it seems like something like that and could actually work on that shape of property.
Building form, it certainly could. Just keep in mind that's the site that they're working with, so they have plenty of room around the site to access the building.
Yep.
The other thing to remember too is this building is between 50 and 60,000 square feet, which is really close to the existing Triplet Tech.
Mm-hmm.
So our program for Triplet right now is almost double of this size. So I've had other districts see this building, fall in love with the building, and say, we want this, except we need 2 of them. So just take what you've done and build another one right beside it, and we're good. It's a very efficient building. Again, built during a different market time, but very cost-effective design.
Are you guys familiar with Academies of Loudon?
We are, yep. Not our projects though.
Not your project? Do you know how many square feet that project was?
I could probably get that. It's been a while. We've looked at that facility. It is big. It's massive. Yeah. Again, very simple form, very simple materials, but long lasting.
How much are you guys guessing that Roanoke job's going to cost? What's the estimate?
Okay, so the good news is we're not guessing. We've gone beyond guessing on that one. That project is being delivered as a design build approach. So we had a builder on board while we are designing. So we know exactly what the costs are. The budget was given. It was, ye shall not be more than X. And so we had to design to budget. long-winded story. It's 3 projects in one. The CTE Center is initially was $80 million of the budget. The other 2 projects were 50 cumulatively. They've done some shifting, so CTE right now is about 77 million.
Not bad.
Yeah, for about 123,000 square feet right now, and a lot of site development. That site development cost is much higher than the one shown in your all's order of magnitude estimate.
Did they already own that land?
The land acquisition was done a couple years prior to turning us loose. So that was they purchased the property, had the funds to purchase the property outright, and so they purchased it, and then we rolled into design.
So the Academies of Loudon is 320,000 square feet on 120 acres of land. Yeah, so more than 3 times.
Very impressive.
Oh, absolutely. So just a few nice exterior shots, and then, gosh, I appreciate all your all's patience. I know it's probably pretty long-winded, but thank you. Thank you for the opportunities to look at this with you all. We're happy to talk about next steps if anybody has some additional questions. Happy to address those.
I guess just to kind of get to the point, from what it sounds like listening to you, it sounds like there's very little reason to believe that it would be a good idea for us to build new at our current place, and there's just a little bit more reason to remodel there, right? I mean, it's not sounding like it's a very good idea at all. Obviously, that's been a big part of our central campus for a long time, or excuse me, our southern campus for a long time. So that would be difficult, I feel like, to move it or have it at the central campus. But at the same time, it just doesn't sound like we're working with much for, a long-term project that, I'd like it to see me out, So that's definitely something I think we have to consider. It just doesn't sound like it's optimal.
Yeah, I think just looking at it from a very objective point of view, you could spend $50 to $60 million to renovate a triplet, expand a triplet, and at the end of the day, still not be at a level that the county would want to be.
Yeah, because you're planning for the future here. So, they keep putting up houses. Things, Shenandoah County is very attached to its buildings. However, you hear buildings don't educate kids, and those same people buy new homes and don't buy 1910 fixer-uppers. So, it's something that this program is important to the county as well. It would be like, discussing getting rid of ag. We would probably have an uprising all the way through. So we need to take care of this, program. I think it's important to the county and its citizens.
Yeah, and I didn't answer this gentleman's question earlier about what do we do if we were to build new elsewhere. What do we do with that facility? It's still something that the school board would have to decide. It still has purpose. It could still have a useful life. It just does not serve a CTE function adequately.
This building here is old, almost as old as that building probably, or somewhere close to. Yes.
I'd like to see us go forward with a feasibility study for Central, building new on the Central campus. I mean, to me, I see no reason Triplet couldn't be refurbished as another governor's school, move the governor's school back there.
So a couple of ideas I had in my head if we would do something would be governor's school, an alternative school. We could also use some of the space for storage or even maintenance. So if you remember probably 80 slides back, maintenance, I don't remember the order. I think it was maintenance, Triplet Tech, and the transportation office were in a row on the highest FCI scores.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You did.
So, we could maybe repurpose that space for some of those some things like that.
With those buildings, though, being somewhat similar in their expiration date, we'd probably, if we say wanted to move Danny down the way a bit, we'd still have to do some renovations. That would be something we'd have to look at as far as the next step to say, okay, we're going to move to say Central, but we're going to, repurpose that. Then we need to talk to Tim back here about really how much money we would really need to make it feasible.
Well, and the great news is, because the facilities condition assessments ran parallel to this study,
Right.
you're already armed with almost all of that information already. You know, in the first 3 years, if you were to take on just the deferred maintenance of that building, about $9.4 million that you're going to have to invest, and that's just roof and systems. That's not changing layouts or adding rooms or anything like that.
But do you mothball a portion of it, and that 9 comes down to 6?
Yep.
Or 5? Doable.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at that. I mean, the high bay spaces, for instance, maybe you don't have to do a lot to those just to store some vehicles in them or make them into storage areas for the time being. Maybe that's a cost that can be deferred, not within the first 3 years, but maybe that's years 5 and 6, when on the schedule right now, that's a much lower number.
Now, I know that for the central campus, that would be the feasibility study, but have you guys taken a look at that plot of land yet, or
We
did you
have,
get a knee-jerk reaction to it?
We have, Mark and the team has walked it. I have walked it aside from them, which, by the way, our team spent a few mornings and a few afternoons on Central just to watch how all of that orchestration happens.
It's a debacle.
And we went like this about 4 times.
Yeah, we all kind of went, oh, I mean, it was really close. We know that there are some issues there already with circulation, especially pickup, drop off, bus loop, all those things happening at one time. It needs to be addressed somehow.
Sure.
So we even evaluated, is that property something we can use to help mitigate some of those issues? So very big picture, and not have done anything really other than hypothesize, but you could solve multiple problems or multiple difficult situations on that property by developing that site for multiple purposes.
Well, and you got to understand, somewhere along the history, there was a couple of guys like you that stood in here and said, hey, this is a great idea. Yeah. Don't take that personally, but I'm just telling you.
He said it. He said it.
But, so, that's something we want to avoid down the road is, you're right, because it's a mess. It's a hot mess up there, for sure.
Well, and you have to realize that buses transported kids 20 years ago.
Sure.
Buses and parents are transporting kids now.
Our population, or what we're holding in schools, really hasn't changed. It's just how we travel and get here. So that, I'm not a fan of, I mean, we closed down elementary schools and buildings across the county to do this for whatever reason. And, somebody thought it was a great idea. And now, because you have to, you don't have a crystal ball to know how we'll travel. I mean, maybe there'll be flying saucers and whatever, cars and whatever. We'll have to worry about that in a different way in 20 years or 50 years. But no, I mean, it's an interesting thing. So,
if we could solve more than one problem with a new building, that would be more bang for
value.
a tremendous value, more bang to the taxpayer buck.
Yep.
And you've heard us say, and you've heard Chris say, that we want to allow for growth and also the future, because our buildings here in Shenandoah County last, 60 years, and we're still using them at full capacity. So we want to make sure that we're still using this facility in 60 years,
Right.
and maybe 70.
We won't have to worry about it.
No, and by that
We're
time,
running in right now.
by that time, someone else is gonna sit at the table, and they're gonna talk to two gentlemen like this and say, I don't know who thought that was.
I know there are people thinking it. I know there's people thinking it.
We do it as
I will
well.
be the only one alive. I'll be looking at you.
I'll be 113.
I know, I won't be here.
Any other questions? I mean, happy to continue to expand on anything you'd like to talk about. We will certainly, await any further direction. I think other next steps we have, there are pieces of the FCA and the whole facilities master planning that has to be completed as well. Demographic studies that we have finished but need to be polished up, and we'll be finishing up that part very soon as well to share with you.
Thank you for all the information. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you.
We realize that's a lot of information in an hour and 45 minutes, and so any questions come up, just route them through administration to us, and we'll be happy to address them.
So our next step on this is we meet with the Board of Supervisors on September the 23rd. Yeah, at Triplet Tech. It'll be a joint work session, so we'll be this will be one of the topics that we'll be talking about.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, and we have already broached a subject with various Board of Supervisor members, so they're aware, but it's going to be a challenge to figure out where that money is going to come from and how we're going to manage that. So that'll be the challenge, and gives the CTE committee something to work on. So there you are, Tom. Okay. Good. All right. Any further discussion or comments from school board on this issue? We kind of have the next steps laid out for us. I do want to thank you, Dr. Shepard, for this is kind of information we obviously needed, so appreciate that. Is there anything else that you have for us other than that one? Okay, I can't believe it. Okay. So I think all we then have are the board member comments. So does anybody want to go first? Anybody want to go? Oh, excuse me.
I'll
Mike, you
go
wanna start
first
off?
if nobody else wants to go first. First of all, I want to thank RRMM again for the great information. I think with the number of kids in our county that are wanting these classes, there's no question we need to move forward with doing something to expand. If we're turning kids away, we shouldn't be limited by the space of the buildings we've got. And the only other thing I wanted to talk about was we all received an email Friday on an incident that took place at Ashby Lee. And I guess I'd like to look at maybe understanding better if we've got something that works at Sandy Hook and W.W. Robinson, how come that same system's not used at all three schools? There may be a good reason for that, I don't know. But I know from experience at Sandy Hook, the kids are inside. The parents pull up, they radio inside what kids are to come out. I don't understand all of it. I would like to hear further on that. But if we have something that works at 2 out of the 3 schools, maybe we should be doing it at all 3 schools. Just something I'd like
So
to,
you're requesting information on the pickup system writ large on the...
why we don't do it countywide the same way at all 3 schools. Other than that,
Dr. Shepard, do you think we can get some sort of presentation so we can... Okay, good.
that's all I've got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Not a thing.
Mrs. Rutz? Petro?
I would just say I think it's a positive that everyone in this room values CTE, and we have, obviously the community is very supportive of it. I think that goes a long way with eventually getting something going with this, whether it's at central or at the central campus or southern. We've seen over the years the need for CTE in our county, and we continue to see the data that forecasts increasing interest, and we don't want to have to turn away students. So great presentation tonight, guys. I know usually we met over dinner over in our we won't be seeing you there anymore, but appreciate you guys coming, and I think we got some good information to work with, and we'll look forward to meeting with the BOS members at Triplet here in September, I believe. So.
Gloria?
My brain is still on vacation, so I just wanted to say, yeah, again, thank you. I think this is some great stuff that we have to look at. I'm very excited that hopefully we'll be able to move forward with this. And I'm hoping that at some point we'll be able to also explore the possibility of having more corporate sponsors or grants, just private sponsorships that companies that would be willing to help us out with this project. So hopefully we'll be able to look into that as well.
Mr. Street?
Well, obviously not much. I apologize. Couldn't get here because of work, but I was listening to it. I was finishing up at work, so, but not surprised. It was a great presentation, but kind of was what we was kind of thinking. But anyway, that's something we have to go forward on.
Yeah, I want to echo what Kyle said. The CTE program is incredibly valuable, maybe especially in this county more so than most others. And the county where I used to teach, it began as the red-headed stepchild and grew into the best program we had in the entire county. It was Baltimore County, and it became the #1 school. At one point, it was a school everybody made fun of, and 4 years later, it was everybody tried to get in. And I think we may be approaching that concept as people look at these pragmatic decisions, and I don't just mean trades, I mean technologies. They're going to be taught there. So one thing I'd caution is, even though we may be looking forward at, you know, a really great new sexy building, in the meantime, we don't forget about building those programs, even in-house with what we got. And not just kind of put it neutral, but make sure that some of the ones, Todd, you were talking about earlier, we really take a good, strong look at. And I want to piggyback on what Gloria said, too, that we have a lot of folks out there talking about maybe funding this, and we have to be kind of creative about finding some of those dollars that could come in and defray some of these costs. And one thing, you guys could stop hiring the strolling strings at those banquets and save a few dollars. No, I know you get those things free, so it's okay. And we love the strolling strings. But like Kyle said, we won't be there anymore. So. Anyway, so with that, I'll accept the motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Cutchall. Second?
Second.
No discussion, I assume? All in favor, aye? Aye. Meeting is adjourned at 8:04.